Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here. After far too long, I finally have the gusto to start exploring the lore of Lord el-melloi II Case Files, a series of light novels that continue the story of Waver Velvet after his debut in Fate Zero. At first, I was planning on trying to summarize this whole series in a single video, but considering how each and every volume of the story could be adapted into its own film, there's just too many juicy details to ignore. Therefore, I'll be covering this series in parts, one video per volume, for as many volumes as I can find translated. These works are sadly rather obscure, mainly because we don't have an official translation for them. Thus, I want to give a huge shout out to Twilight's Call on the Beast Slayer forum for translating these amazing books. Efforts like these are critical to the fandom, and I am truly indebted. What I hope to do is narrate to you my summary of these books, while of course providing my own commentary and other fun details along the way. This is a fantastic opportunity for you guys to expand not just your knowledge of Fate, but also your repertoire of Magecraft knowledge. I know this will help me with my Lessons in Magecraft series, so let's jump right on in. Honestly, the first volume starts off en media res, forcing you to pick up the pieces as you go along. For our purposes, I'll lay a tiny bit of groundwork that the novels don't. I assume you all know about what happens in Fate Zero. Waver Velvet, a rather unimpressive mage studying at the Clock Tower, decides to try and prove himself by stealing his professor's servant catalyst and joining the Fourth Holy Grail War in Fuyuki. He summons Iskandar, or Alexander the Great, and he learns to take pride in himself through their interactions. Kenneth el-melloi Archibald, his teacher at the Clock Tower, procured a different catalyst and entered the same war after him. The two rarely interacted during that conflict, and Kenneth lost his life to the mage Kiritsugu Emiya and his saber servant King Arthur. Waver nearly died in the war when Gilgamesh defeated Iskandar, but just before their final battle, Iskandar appointed Waver as one of his vassals and tasked him with surviving to speak of his king's glory. Gilgamesh then spared Waver out of a respect between kings. Following the war, Waver returned to the Clock Tower, graduated, and became a teacher there. Out of respect for his late teacher, Waver compiled the remnants of Kenneth's research into an encyclopedia of arcane secrets. From an academic standpoint, this saved the el-melloi family from ruin. Acknowledging these efforts, the heir to the el-melloi family, Rhinus el-melloi Archisort, recruits him to fix the damage he caused by interfering with Kenneth in the war. This meant three things. 1. Waver would share the el-melloi family's massive debt. 2. He would search for ways to repair the family's damaged magic crest. And 3. He would temporarily take on the title of Lord el-melloi until Rhinus grew old enough to take on the title for herself. Waver accepted these terms, but insists that he at least be called Lord el-melloi II, as the original title itself would be too much to bear. As a lord at the Clock Tower, he is put in charge of teaching modern magecraft theories, and he proves to be hella good at it, despite his own use of magecraft being subpar. Along the way, he takes on various jobs Rhinus gives him to pay off the debt and help the family. Our first story is one such job. Along with serving the el-melloi family, he hopes to achieve enough fame in the Clock Tower to be selected for the Fifth Holy Grail War in Fuyuki, so that he may once again summon Iskandar. Of course, it wouldn't be right to talk about this series without providing a proper backstory for Gray, our delightful narrator. Gray is a young girl who was raised as a gravekeeper of the Blackmore Cemetery in Wales. If you recognize the name Blackmore, it may be because of the dead apostle ancestor Gransurg Blackmore. The clan was named after him, really. What makes this cemetery special is that it holds the sealed remains of Rongo Minyad, the holy lance used by King Arthur. Back during Arthurian legends, the king's sister, Morgan Le Fay, commissioned a means of containing the lance's tremendous power. She teamed up with the Atlas organization to create a replica of their dreaded superweapon, Logos React. Logos React was a supercomputer that could run virtual thought experiments, predicting various ways for history to play out. Thus, Logos React Replica was created to use similar computations in sealing away the lance. Morgan gave this device an artificial personality based on Sir Kay, the Round Table Knight who adored Arthur the least. Shorthand, Logos React Replica goes by the name AD and was entrusted to the Blackmores up until the modern era. The clan has long since strived to revive King Arthur in flesh and spirit, trying to raise a being capable of wielding the lance sealed inside Ad. All of their attempts failed with each generation, until Grey, that is. She was raised to be King Arthur's flesh and was instilled with Artoria's essence. 10 years prior to the start of Case Files, during the time when Artoria was actually summoned as a servant during the Fourth War, Grey's body morphed into that of Artoria. Finally, the village had succeeded, and they proceeded to groom her into Arthur's second coming. Her life was lonely, with Ad being her only friend. He awakened at the same time she did, sporting a snarky and condescending attitude. Waver eventually visited the Blackmoor Cemetery, hoping that one of the gravekeepers there could help him oppose heroic spirits during the upcoming Fifth Grail War. Bearsack Blackmoor, one of Grey's mentors, insisted Waver take her away to the clock tower, reasoning it was too soon for Grey to lose her soul in exchange for Arthur's. Reluctantly, Waver accepted her as his apprentice and bodyguard, despite being fearful of her face. It was the face of his enemy during the Fourth Grail War, after all. Noticing his reaction, Grey agreed to follow him, so long as he continued to hate her face. It sounds odd, but you have to bear in mind that this isn't her real face, or rather, the face she grew up with. She struggles with the side of herself that is supposed to be Artoria, and the young girl she truly is, a lonely gravekeeper who, ironically, fears ghosts. These details all get explained in small pieces scattered throughout the volumes, but I wanted to compile them here because I like knowing them as I read. With other details, I don't mind discussing them as they come. Volume 1 starts with a prologue, in which Luvia holds Grey at finger point. Like Reen, Luvia can fire gundo shots, and she takes this opportunity to interrogate Grey about what she thinks of Waver as her master. Luvia's annoyed, deeming him the worst kind of mage. Grey tells a story about when a cat bit Waver's boot. Angered, Waver wanted to get revenge on the cat, but before he could, he discovered the cat had been hit by a car. Waver was pissed, but still took the time to cradle the cat, heal its pain, and comfort it before it died. While he was upset about getting his boots chewed on before, he now let his entire outfit get stained in the cat's blood. He buried the cat while looking bored. He also reflected on how he couldn't save the cat, and that doing so shouldn't even be a mage's priority. He reasoned that the world is filled with misunderstandings and miscommunications. There is no one truth, yet mages still seek one in the form of the root. This is an odd first introduction to the world, as it's actually a scene that occurs a bit later throughout this volume. The actual start of the volume is less cryptic. Grey lives in a dorm in London, and her dorm supervisor is a man named Krishna. No, not the one from Hindu mythology. Grey is overwhelmed by London's dense population and likens the city to a cemetery, as if people were all marching toward their final destination. She's accustomed to the countryside, not the big city. Waver's apartment, or flat, is less populated due to the presence of a bounded field. Rather than being put up through magecraft, this bounded field was naturally occurring. Waver isn't a very skilled mage, so he chose this spot because he'd struggle forming his own bounded field, at least one this strong anyway. As a substitute for Lord el-melloi, he had every chance to live at the el-melloi mansion, but instead chooses to pay rent at one of the family's other buildings. It's his way of trying to pay off his debt. Grey has been in London for 2 months after receiving Waver's recommendation to study at the clock tower. She struggles to follow along with her classes, making her stand out among her peers. Of course, her main reason for being here is as Waver's apprentice and bodyguard. Waver's flat is old and run down. When Grey visits as requested, she overhears him and Rhinus arguing about the Fifth Holy Grail War. Rhinus declares that if Waver can earn some achievements, perhaps he will be selected to travel to the Far East. As such, Rhinus gives him a job. She uses the volume in Hydrargerum, a mystic code created by the late Kenneth el-melloi Archibald. It can take on all sorts of shapes and forms, but Rhinus has repurposed it into a familiar named Trimau. Grey gets along with Rhinus, but she still insists on wearing her hooded cloak at all times, covering her hair and most of her face. Waver, on the other hand, is disorganized and smokes all the time. He sucks as a mage, so his main redeeming quality is his understanding of magecraft theory. Thus, he's a wonderful instructor, and a lot of his students are envious of Grey for getting preferential treatment. Despite his messy room, Waver keeps himself rather tidy. He smokes cigars, which are actually mystic codes he made to activate bounded fields and magic circuits. They can also help keep a tether to reality. Originally, Waver didn't smoke, but in desperation to fit in as a lord, he took up cigars after hearing it would make him look more mature. Gray doesn't exactly enjoy the secondhand smoke, but it has become something of a familiar comfort to her now. The two discuss the relevance of angels to magecraft. Originally, much of magecraft was categorized into the 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. Since the 20th century, however, the concept of angels has been introduced. An angel, or vessel of power, is a blanket term to describe things with an ambiguous magical nature. Angels don't necessarily refer to the biblical angels, but rather various beings that humans believe in. Mystery exists from human worship, so mages have utilized people's worship for angels as a catalyst for their craft. As such, a mage may not even believe in Christianity, but they can still use the concept of an angel to channel their spells. Many modern mages use the belief in angels of the Abrahamic faith as a foundation for new magecraft. Waver has been tasked to investigate a castle that invokes the image of an angel. It is called Adra, the Castle of Separation, and he needs Gray to come with him. The two take a long train ride and a trek through the wilderness on foot. Not only is Waver an unimpressive mage, he's also physically weak, needing to take frequent breaks that almost get them late. In a forest clearing, they meet Flu, or Fluger, a boisterous muscle man covered in dirt. Both Waver and Flu have received an invitation to the castle, and so the 3 of them finish the journey together. Flu seems to be more brawn than brain, a robed man from the Middle East who uses magecraft as a mercenary. Rather than a proper mage, he's what mages call a spellcaster. The castle itself resembles the hollowed-out remains of a giant, which Waver compares to the children of angels in the first book of Enoch. The castle was created by the magus Garion Ashbourne, who had passed away just a month prior. At the castle gate, a butler welcomes them in. Inside, the castle is adorned with angelic statues, stained glass images of Cupid, and other angelic depictions like the monstrous 4-winged seraphs. The room gives off a strange aura or color that makes Gray hallucinate falling into brain matter, while disembodied eyes stare her down. Thankfully, the smell of Waver's cigar knocks her back to her senses. Apparently, defensive meditation is a countermeasure mages use for this sort of thing, but Gray still needs more training in it. A well-dressed man in blonde hair and blue eyes comes to greet Waver. His name is Heine Istari. While his family once practiced alchemy, Heine once abandoned the life of a mage in favor of joining the Holy Church as a monk. Still, he was so talented that his family dragged him back to the clock tower, creating tension between the church and Mages Association. As he and Waver speak, a timid 8-year-old girl pops in. Her name is Rosalind Istari, Heine's little sister. When Flu reveals himself, Heine ominously refers to him as the master-slaying astrologer Fluger. They realize they're all being gathered as acquaintances of Garion's, invited to attend the reading of his will. Of course, Waver is acting on behalf of Kenneth, who used to know Garion before his death. Yet another mage enters the room, a wheelchair-bound old man named Orlok Caesarmund. He is the authority of Papiliomagia, or butterfly magic, which is based around the different stages of life that a butterfly goes through. More specifically, it has to do with dissolving one's own body and reconstructing it anew from a cocoon. He's a grumpy bastard, berating Waver for being unworthy of the title of Lord. Even so, Orlok introduces everyone to yet another man. A guy in his 20s, wearing an eye patch, announces himself as Tokito Jirobo Seigen, a Yamabushi cultist who practices Shugendo, just like Scandinavia Peperoncino and FGO. Despite Shugendo considering women unclean, Sagan seems smitten by both Rosalind and Gray. Heine gets protective of his sister, sparking a bit of a fight between him and Sagan. Sagan uses a technique called Hinatsuho, allowing him to manipulate a flying disc. In response, Heine uses a spell that conjures blades from the floor. Rather than actually attacking, these blades disperse into flower petals, which form stone roses for all of the castle's visitors. The roses and their scent remind Gray of the many undead creatures she has a history of slaying. Sagan admits being impressed by Heine's alchemy, and the two shake hands. One final guest arrives at the castle, a beautiful young woman in blue. It's Luvia, or Luvia Gilletta Edelfelt. The old man accuses her of showing up in search of treasure. She's heir to a family of gem magic users in Finland. The family's previous master retired early, so Luvia is representing the Edelfelts at a relatively young age. The old man Orlok asserts that the Edelfelts have come into prominence over the many years by traveling around the globe and selectively appropriating the resulting magecraft of various conflicts. He calls them hyenas, whereas Luvia calls her lineage hunters. Defending herself, she takes a jab at Orlok by assuming he's here because his magic crest is degrading. Magic crests are, of course, the stored mystery of a mage family accumulated over time. Like an organ containing magical knowledge, mages build up their crests and pass them on to blood relatives to stay strong, even as mystery leaves the world in favor of technology. Generally, the older a mage family, the more valuable their magic crest, since it has more history and development behind it. Apparently, however, a crest can get too old and even start to degrade. Luvia is aware that the castle's creator, Geryon, was known as the Master of Restoration, capable of repairing damaged crests. She means to mock Orlok for having some deficiency with his own crest. Luvia herself is here to try and salvage Geryon's ability, not because she needs it, but because it would go to waste otherwise. Before a full-on fight can break out, everyone is addressed by Hishidi Arashino, a woman in traditional Japanese clothing who declares herself from the Clock Tower's Faculty of Law, sometimes localized as the Department of Policies. Unlike the other 11 faculties of the Clock Tower, the Faculty of Law is less about studying mystery to reach the root, and more about using magecraft to preserve the Clock Tower's ability to thrive in society. While considered a heretical group, they've established themselves as the absolute governance of the tower, and for this instance, Hishidi is here to execute Geryon's will. She explains that the will itself is quite short, only consisting of 3 statements. 1. Ask for the angels' names. 2. Those who are asked and unable to answer shall, in all cases, be torn apart by angels. And 3. Those who can take hold of the angels will be granted my inheritance. In other words, the various guests need to figure out this mystery, and are each given hints contained within their invitations. Gold letters appear on the invitations, spelling out what are meant to be their angelic names. There's no time limit to figure out the mystery, so the guests are told to stay at the castle in rooms labeled with their respective names. The Ashbourne family servants will provide food. The game is afoot. Some time passes, and when Waver and Gray head to their room, they open the door to find Luvia ready for bed in white, frilly negligee. Embarrassed, Luvia tries to hide a plush dog, one that Gray recognizes from a kid's TV show. Luvia's demeanor and vulnerability here contrast with her earlier confidence in the castle lobby. Before Luvia can blast Waver with a first-rate spell, he confesses that this is supposed to be the room assigned to him. Waver shows his invitation, which says his angelic name is Mihail, but Luvia points out that the door outside says Michael with a C. Whoops. As a last-ditch effort to survive, he declares that this is a Shemham Farai, a Kabbalistic term, revealing to Luvia that the castle uses Kabbalah as its magical foundation. Gray knows from her lessons that Kabbalah is a magecraft formed upon Judaism that the orders of the Clock Tower are based on. This is meant to be a bargaining chip, a bit of inside info for Luvia, so she accepts it in exchange for blasting a hole in Waver's jacket with a gundo shot. Escaping alive, Waver has Gray write Shemham Farai on a castle map next to Luvia's room. The two search the corridors, passing by even more angel symbolism before finding the actual room with Mihail on it. Settling in for the night, Waver remarks how there are actually too many angels in the castle, so many that their meanings begin to blur. Suddenly, a third voice rings out, mocking him for being incompetent. This is Ad being a jackass, so Waver shakes him around in his cage. Anyway, Waver is here to claim Geryon's inheritance on behalf of Rhinus' request. He gives Gray the bed, and instantly falls asleep on the sofa. Apparently this is normal for him. He'll fall asleep on the couch of his apartment and laboratory, often while playing video games. Sounds like me playing FGO. The next morning, Gray struggles to get Waver awake. She's his apprentice, but is also stuck being his damn caretaker. To that end, he can act like a spoiled elementary schooler. Awaiting outside their room was a delicious feast. Hishidi comes to properly greet Waver, and he admits he's bad around beautiful women. She asks if that's why Gray hides her face behind a hood, and Waver agrees. Each of the guests are served a traditional breakfast according to their nationality. More specifically, each meal appears to be catered to the tastes of the individual. Everyone seems to get along in the dining room, but people pay attention to Flu when he removes the belt from his waist, revealing an ensemble of well-used but well-maintained knives. The different knives have astrological signs carved onto them, indicating his preferred magecraft. He uses the knives to tell fortunes. When Luvia arrives for breakfast, she is accompanied by her manservant, Clown, a tall Mohican man with a mohawk. Orlok and the young boy who pushes his wheelchair don't show up at all. Just as everyone is chowing down, Luvia gets everyone's attention and relays what Waver told her last night about the angelic names being a Shemham Farai. The guests explain to Gray that a Shemham Farai means a gathering of names, a wordplay of sorts based on abbreviating the 72 angels in the Book of Exodus. Waver figured this out because Mihail is used less frequently than Michael, with both names appearing among the 72 angels. Knowing this, it's safe to assume that the angels they're looking for could be associated with either the zodiac signs, the 72 angels, or even the 72 demon gods of King Solomon. Given Kabbalah's penchant for wordplay and number play, they'll likely have to solve a riddle. Sagan suggests they share their angelic names, since they're on the doors anyway. The guests are in competition for the inheritance, but they have more to gain from sharing information at this point. Even so, Heine, Rosalind, Flu, and Luvia refuse, instead leaving the dining room. Heine, specifically, begins isolating himself from intruders, establishing a bounded field around his room. He goes out at night to investigate. Cleverly, he combines his knowledge of the Zodiac and the 72 angels to determine a destination. Essentially, the Zodiac signs are based around the sun, and if you split the angels evenly between the 12 signs, you can create a compass of sorts. A full circle divided into 72 sections means that every section is 5 degrees. Thus, if you know your angelic name, you can associate that with a direction on a compass, with a reasonably accurate range. His angelic name happens to be Ariel, Angel 46, giving him a heading of about 230 degrees from his room. He also happened to listen in on Luvia and Waver the previous night, so he knows their angelic names. If you plot the locations of their rooms on a map and line them up with their respective directions, there's actually a point where they all intersect. Heine is heading to that intersection. There, he finds a set of smashed-up statues, with only their pedestals remaining intact. His invitation glows yet again, revealing more letters. An angel becomes a beast. Gazing at the western sky, it swallows the sun. He thinks he can find a new direction by limiting the list of angels to those associated with beasts in the west. Before he can, however, he spots a set of footprints and decides to follow them. He pulls out a small mystic code, a metallic dog he can awaken to hunt for both scents and traces of mana. While tailing the dog, some of the gems he possesses indicate that he's being watched. Recall that Heine once ditched being a mage in favor of joining the church. When he did that, the Istari family turned to Rosalind to inherit the family crest. Normally, the body rejects magic crests, even when they're compatible by blood, so crests are transplanted in parts over time, in combination with drugs to help the compatibility. Rosalind appeared to be highly compatible with the crest, so they transferred it much more quickly. As a bad side effect, it consumed most of her life force. Hearing about this, Heine returned to the family and had the crest retransplanted onto his leg. By this point, the crest has started to behave abnormally, going on to consume his life force. As such, he's expected to die within just a few years, which is why he wants the inheritance. It may be able to repair his crest, allowing him to live. It's less that he wants to survive for his own sake, and more that he doesn't want his sister feeling guilty for cutting his life short. Eventually, the dog gets destroyed by an ominous darkness. From the shadows, 2 red eyes stare at Heine and ask for an angel's name. He states Ariel, but the shadow doesn't respond. Clearly this thing is looking for a different angel, and Heine has yet to figure out which one corresponds with the Western beast. The shadow tells him that if he cannot answer, he shall be torn apart. Rising as a four-legged creature, the shadow tries to tear through Heine with its claws. The Istari family's alchemic specialty is the Living Stone, an artifact buried inside Heine's own body. More specifically, this stone is split into several gems throughout his body, and he can perform spells by channeling mana into them. Activating the stones, he generates a suit of violet armor and fights back as a knight. Wielding a sharp spear, he takes to the beast. Before he can attack it, the beast howls, engulfing him in a scalding hot wind. Drawing out a flask, he releases white flames that, combined with his ode, turn to ice. This is alchemy that he can perform because of his elemental affinity for both water and fire. No longer affected by the heat, he lands a blow on the creature, causing it to flee inside the castle. Pursuing the shadow, Heine returns to the central atrium and takes notice of the largest statue there, one of the Archangel Michael, brandishing a sword meant to drive away Satan, and that's when he finds something horrifying. Commotion wakes both Waver and Gray, and when they reach the atrium, they find Hishidi impaled upon Michael's sword. Once all the other guests have gathered, Heine frees her and lowers her body to the ground. Waver inspects the corpse, taking note of her eyes being gouged out by claws, and a chunk of her back had been removed, likely where her magic crest was. From her sleeve falls an envelope of her own, with the angelic name Hachasaya. Seeing this, Waver doubts his initial idea that the angelic names were clues to a mystery. Now, he explains that the 72 angels also correspond to parts of the body. In Hachasaya's case, the eyes. Thus, rather than clues, the angelic names may be warnings of how they will die should they fail to be worthy of inheritance. It has become a truly deadly competition. Fearing that the guests would start killing each other, Waver and Gray return to their room. Gray is surprised the other mages aren't more worried about the situation, but Waver explains it's normal for mages to brush with death. If they didn't fight each other, they'd never experience each other's techniques. Everyone's confident about their chances, except for Waver, of course. Instead of fighting, he goes to drink booze. While they do have the option of running away, Waver asserts he can't abandon this mission. He gives Gray the chance to leave, but she stays for his sake, and his gratitude makes her smile. Orlok, being nosy, enters the room and interrupts them. Wanting to join in on the alcohol, he releases some glowing butterflies that fetch the bottle and pour him a drink. The door was locked, so it's assumed these butterflies picked the lock for him as well. Orlok admits that while he despises modern magecraft and its lack of legitimacy, he does occasionally value the fresh perspective that comes from it. Waver's opinions on the situation have been helpful. He's here to confirm that Waver's goal in all of this is to repair the el-melloi crest. Sure enough, Kenneth's magic crest was horribly damaged during the Fourth Holy Grail War. Thanks, Kiritsugu. Even if Waver is just being Kenneth's substitute, recovering and fixing that crest is incredibly important. Orlok admits he's here for the same reason. His crest has reached its limit and is decaying. As such, he requests that Waver form an alliance with him. Assuming the Ashbourne legacy may be reusable, it's worth cooperating. Waver suspects that this arrangement would heavily benefit Orlok because, in the event that the legacy can only be used once, he'd be the easiest to kill. In contrast, Orlok says that, while he would fight for its only use, if the legacy just takes a long time to reuse, he wouldn't mind letting Waver use it first. Orlok plans on living for decades to come, despite his wrinkled body, so he's willing to wait. Waver then asks what Orlok was doing last night while Heine was investigating. Even though magecraft defies logic and reasoning, he still wants to confirm the old man's alibi. Orlok claims he was playing chess with Flu, and then confesses this ordeal is the result of Garion's curse. If so, this could be dangerous. Curses can take all sorts of forms, but it's fairly common for them to become more effective after their caster's death. Apparently, Garion had a son who died of illness before ever being admitted to the clock tower. Both Garion's son and wife died from the same disease. Now, mages can be cruel, only valuing their children as a means of passing on their magic crest. Garion, however, really seemed to care for his son, and went mad from the loss. Orlok describes that Garion was using this castle as a workshop for a special kind of research. Of course, we can't exactly take Orlok's word at face value. Meanwhile, Luvia takes a break from her own inquiry to drink some tea brewed by Clown. Not trusting the room she was given, Luvia immediately had the space renovated with furniture shipped in by an Edelfelt family helicopter. Using a map of the area, Luvia spreads out jewels and activates them by imagining her heart becoming one with the gems like a symbiotic machine. The gems begin to move, rolling about the table in search of something on the map. She is utilizing the gems as a means of dowsing, searching for hidden secrets. Each of the gems activates according to its respective Kabbalistic god, such as Mars, Kamael, and Jupiter. Soon, the gems begin to orbit the map like celestial bodies, and by observing this orbit, Luvia hopes to discover the castle's secrets. However, it appears there's something interfering with the process, stopping her gems midway. Her angelic name, Michael, suggests she will die by having her right tibia attacked. She wouldn't have thought of aligning the angels with the human body, if not for Waver's suggestion. She's annoyed, because while she studies other forms of magecraft to add to her repertoire, he studies things he can never hope to utilize himself. Normally, mages only care about things that improve their own craft, so Waver stands out from other mages in that regard. Luvia's been doing her own investigation, determining the alibis of the other guests and castle servants. While Heine described the beast he was fighting, she doesn't accept his testimony blindly. If Hishidi were truly in competition for the Ashbourne legacy, then it makes sense she could be killed like anyone else. The issue is that she was killed and put on display for everyone to find. She and Clown suspect that making a spectacle of Hishidi's corpse was meant to warn one of the guests. Clown can tell that Luvia is interested in Waver because she's taken to brushing the hair of her stuffed animal. Waver is, after all, the youngest lord the clock tower has ever seen. Moreover, his actual family only started studying magecraft 2 generations prior, leaving him no reputation to speak of. Thus, Waver's appointment as a lord is due to how much influence Rhines has. Ultimately, Luvia reasons that she and Waver are incompatible. There's something about him that she finds twisted. Suddenly, Flu comes to the door, and after being threatened by Clown's imposing battle stance, Luvia allows the spellcaster inside. Flu consoles Luvia about failing her divination. Clearly, Garion didn't want this mystery solved through such convenient magecraft. As an astrologer, Flu admits that even his own fortune-telling won't work. He also confesses that he's only involved in this mess for the money and wants Luvia to hire him. Hoping to test Flu's strength, she gathers her jewels and prepares to attack. The jewels light up and revolve around her finger to create a vortex of life, the Edelfelt's kaleidoscope, not to be confused with Zelrech's true magic. In this case, she's just gathering mana for a concentrated energy blast. In response, Flu whips out his knives and protects himself in a small region that defies cause and effect. It's similar to creating zones of good fortune through feng shui. Luvia is impressed, but too stubborn to say it aloud. Instead, she offers to pay him for his service as a hitman. Flu agrees, so long as he isn't tasked to fight Orlok. Acting on her suspicion, she actually asks Flu to assassinate Waver. The next morning, Waver, Gray, Orlok, and his young assistant go to inspect the central atrium. On the way, they notice another door with a nameplate that reads Kamael. Surprisingly, this angel is not of the Shemhamphorai, but Waver notes it's still part of the Sephirot of Kabbalah. Orlok adds that Kamael is in charge of the Angels of Destruction. Hishidi's body had been removed from the atrium, but bloodstains still remain for Waver to investigate. He would test each stain with a drop of liquid from a vial kept in his jacket. The blood changes color based on the concentration of mana, which Waver hopes can determine precisely when Hishidi died. As Waver continues to add drops of liquid to the stains and take notes, Orlok decides to announce his angelic name is Nanael, which means he'll be killed by losing his tongue. Waver then finds it strange that Hishidi wasn't wearing her glasses when they discovered her corpse. Where did those glasses go? Just as Waver is about to reveal his findings, Luvia, Flu, and Clown enter the atrium. Luvia wonders just what Waver expects to learn by investigating the bloodstains, if he doesn't know the suspect's abilities. Here, Waver breaks out some detective jargon, namely the terms howdunit, who done it, and why done it. He admits that this method won't help him find how the crime took place, nor who did it, but he does hope to discover why Hishidi was killed. He demonstrates his knowledge of magecraft by detailing that jewel magecraft goes all the way back to Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. Luvio's Gundo shot and English spells, on the other hand, indicate her magecraft is sourced from Northern Europe. Therefore, she must be using jewels to store her own magical energy. Using them is more of an extension of rune magecraft. Probing into this pisses Luvia off. She threatens to blast him to pieces, but Orlok's presence subdues her. Apparently, the way Waver explores magecraft, exposing its secrets, deprives them of the very mystery that helps them function. When Kenneth was still his teacher, he was told that, ironically, such enthusiasm for magecraft actually destroys it. Mentioning Kenneth makes Gray start thinking. Waver doesn't speak about his experience in the Fourth Grail War, so she's only able to glean what she can from other people's speculation. For all she knows, Waver may have been the one to kill Kenneth himself, as unlikely as that sounds. Frustrated, Luvia storms off, dragging her allies along with her. Mages all have a switch, some kind of method needed to activate their magic circuits and cast spells. Some imagine pulling a trigger, others picture piercing their own heart. Some use drugs, while others activate their circuits from sexual urges. Flu happens to use thirst as his switch, invoking the image of himself in the desert without water. By chanting, "Lead me," he tosses 6 of his knives into the ground to form a magic circle. When 2 of the knives struggle to penetrate, he channels his ode to overpower them. The knives blast away, stabbing into an invisible wall, disabling the bounded field around him. By repeating this ritual multiple times, Flu opens the way for Luvia to explore deeper into the castle. She lights the way with a violet flame, and the two descend a dark staircase before reaching a room with a horrible stench. They've discovered Garion's private quarters, a cramped space with a silver pentagram, copper goblet, and various torture devices. Inside, Luvia finds some magic circles she thinks could be the Ashbourne's foundational formula. Ignoring any danger, she touches her finger to them. Lightning arcs up from the circles, but is absorbed by one of her jewels. She begins reading the circles: Asmodeus, Belphegor, Baal, Adramelech, Lilith, the names of demons or fallen angels. This leads her and Flu to believe the Castle of Separation is based upon the dark side of the Sephiroth. Meanwhile, Rosalind stays in her room as instructed. She didn't wind up seeing Hishidi's body, but even the news of it weighs heavy on her. She wonders who killed Hishidi, realizing it could even be her own brother. Heine is out exploring the castle, and he's left Rosalind in the care of Sagan, who is thrilled to hang out with her. She, in turn, feels safe around him. Chatting it up, Sagan confesses he nearly gave up on being a mage because his dad had multiple kids. Like an ass, the father decided to have his kids compete to see who would inherit the family crest. Sagan and all of his siblings were taught the basics of Shugendo, but he failed to meet expectations early on. One of his brothers immediately stood out as the strongest, which was better than if they were all forced to fight each other to the bitter end. When creating curses, mages sometimes select a catalyst by having various poisonous and violent creatures duke it out for the top spot. The same could have been done with Sagan and his siblings, a process called mage poisoning. In this case, however, not doing this wound up being a bad move. While Sagan himself didn't care about succeeding the family, his other siblings did. Foolishly, they all launched a joint attack on the brother at his succession ceremony, and when their father stepped in, nearly all of them died as their temple went up in flames. Sagan was away at the time, not attending the ritual, so he survived. The brother, having inherited the crest, also survived, although barely. The brother had been horribly charred by Tengu fire, and the crest was the only thing keeping him alive. He begged Sagan to take the crest so that he could die, and reluctantly, Sagan complied. Without anything else to do, he continued his life as an ascetic hermit. Sickness nearly killed him, but while it took one of his eyes, the crest kept him alive. Sagan was never cut out to be a mage, not like his brother anyway, so he hoped his children may inherit the crest and love magecraft the same way his brother did. Naturally, he needs to fix the crest for it to be of value, though. Thus, both he and Heine share disdain for their respective crests, which is why they get along. Somehow, this story makes Rosalind tired, so she falls asleep as Sagan gently strokes her hair. Heine, on the other hand, is busy wandering the front gardens, which are more like a forest. He did some digging and found out Orlok's angelic name, Nanael, and noticed that both it and Hishidi's name, Hachasaya, pointed in the direction of Ares. He once again calculated where the two directions intersect and heads to the second location. Once more, he finds various pedestals where angel statues should be. His invitation lights up, revealing the same text he'd already seen about the beast in the western sky. Heine discovers that one of the pedestals can be moved to reveal a hidden staircase. He suspects Hishidi must have already found this place, and proceeds with caution, donning his armor. Within the passageway, he once again encounters the shadow beast that attacked him the night before. Heine thrusts his spear at the creature, but its claws tear right through the spear. Since his weapon isn't strong enough, Heine next traps the creature by softening his armor and absorbing a second strike. The armor transforms into chains with which to trap the beast. Hoping to reveal its true form, Heine reforges his spear and raises it once more to strike. The next morning, the guests are once again called to the atrium. At the feet of the very same statue Hishidi was impaled on, Heine was found dead, missing his left foot. Understandably, Rosalind cries out in horror. When Waver asks to look at the body, Rosalind irrationally blames him for her brother's death and forbids anyone from touching the body. Then, Gray steps forward, asking if she can hold a small memorial for Heine, with a prayer she'd like to say. The only ones to stick around and listen wind up being Waver, Rosalind, and Sagan. Out in the garden, both Heine and Hishidi are buried by the castle servants. After lighting some incense, Gray offers a blessing for the deceased. Midway through the prayer, though, she stops, forgetting the words she'd heard countless times as a child. Luckily, Waver is able to remind her of the next passage, allowing her to continue. Rosalind apologizes for her earlier outburst and thanks Gray for the prayer. She wonders why Gray, a mage, would even know such a prayer. In truth, Gray doesn't really consider herself a mage, but rather a girl who grew up at a cemetery. She's conflicted about that past. After Rosalind and Sagan leave, Waver confronts Gray by saying that even though mages aren't known for saying prayers, the term Amen actually comes from Kabbalah, specifically the phrase Adonai Melech Neman. It's another one of those abbreviations common in Kabbalah. Watching from behind a castle wall, Flu reveals he's been eavesdropping. By now, Waver has more or less figured out that Luvia hired Flu to kill him. That said, the two of them speak rather casually, until Waver comments on the state of Heine's body. It's surprising that the armor created from Heine's living stone could be shattered. He was stabbed through the chest, with signs of his chest being removed. He had been killed at some other location, and then brought to the atrium afterward. The group is interrupted when Orlok arrives, claiming Luvia is about to start something. She is eager to put an end to this ordeal, and calls the other guests to her room. She finds Hishidi and Heine's deaths unacceptable, as they were both talented mages. With everyone gathered, she reveals how she and Flu found a hidden room. Ever since, Luvia's been trying to store all of the castle's magical circuits into one of her jewels. Thus, rather than solve the mystery, she will simply take the entire castle, or what's important about it, with her. The idea of capturing a mage's workshop this complex is very ambitious, and yet she's confident she can pull it off. Via a magic circle on the ground made from gems, Luvia begins to alter the castle's magic formula. Step by step, her influence expands from herself, to her room, then to the entire castle. The gems radiate a rainbow spectrum, but just as Luvia thinks she's succeeded, Waver notices that something's off. Everyone in the room begins to collapse, and a deep darkness swallows up Luvia, Waver, and Gray. Within this darkness, Gray is shown a memory from the past, one where Orlok was healthy enough not to need a wheelchair. The old man was working with Garyon to complete his research. Garyon's wife was still alive back then, and she seemed very pleasant. Before Gray can process all of this, she is woken up by Waver. While unconscious, Gray's hood had slipped off, and because he doesn't want to see her face, he pulls it back over her and smacks her on the forehead. What the fuck, dude? I mean, I get it, but geez. Anyway, Waver had saved Luvia by putting up a bounded field at the last second, but now it seems his bounded field got trapped within another bounded field. The three of them are stuck within a dark vortex that is slowly trying to swallow them. Even after pushing her magic crest and expending a handful of gems, Luvia's plan failed, much to her shame. She questions why Waver bothered to save her, and he admits that she's just as talented a mage as Heine and Hishidi. It would be a waste to let her die. Luvia thinks she can free them from their trap by releasing enough magical energy, but it'll take time since she exhausted herself getting into this mess. Waver leaves it to her, and amazingly falls asleep cross-legged. Back in the guest room, Rosalind wonders why the other guests are being weakened by the darkness. She then figures out it doesn't affect her because she doesn't have a magic crest of her own. From the darkness, the shadow beast from earlier returns, rapidly charging forward. Back in the trap, Luvia cuts her finger and uses the blood to draw another magic circle. As she prepares it, Gray tries to start a conversation by comparing her spell from before to hacking a computer. Gray struggles to remember the Greek term she's trying to convey, but Waver wakes up to clarify she's thinking of a Trojan horse. The idea being that Luvia was trying to infiltrate the castle and take control of it from within. Their discussion clarifies something for Waver, making him insist they get out of this trap as soon as possible, or everyone, including the other guests, will be killed. Unleashing a barrage of Gundo shots with her gems, Luvia fights back at the darkness, but it's not enough even as she burns her magic circuits to exhaustion. Suddenly, Waver gives her some advice, to think of the gems not as stones, but as mud. He takes Luvia by the wrist and tells her how to better use her signature style. It seems arrogant, but Luvia nonetheless listens. Apparently, she's thought her family's magecraft relied on taking pride in the value of things, hence why they used luxurious jewels. In truth, however, it's the circulation of that value that gives her spells power. To help her channel this flow, Waver opens his magic circuits up to her, a risky move that could easily kill him if Luvia wanted to exploit it. Instead, she lets his advice flow into her, changing her conceptual image. Through this guidance, Luvia's jewel grows brighter and brighter. The burden of sharing magic circuits like this causes one of Waver's blood vessels to burst. Even so, he endures, and he signals for her to strike. Another bullet of energy is released, much stronger than before, crashing through the dark. While this creates an opening for them to return to the castle, Waver gives a look of harsh animosity. This whole time, he's endured Luvia's scorn, but experiencing her potential directly and seeing how his theories improved her so truly hurt. These were talents he could never achieve on his own. Even though they were working together to escape, a fierce tension stands between them. Provocatively, Luvia asks Waver how he felt when Kenneth died. In response, he clarifies that he didn't kill his master, and he only found out afterward. That said, he explains he was sad that he couldn't see things from Kenneth's perspective, not even once. After a moment of silence, Luvia accepts this answer and declares that he will become her tutor. Despite calling him a destroyer of magecraft, Luvia admits she can learn from him, and since he's directly connected to her magic circuits, he knows too much about Edelfelt magecraft to be left alone. She will attend the clock tower the following year and have him teach her. This breaks the tension, and Waver finds it funny how straightforward Luvia can be. He'll consider the proposition after they solve the mystery. Back in the guest room, Waver, Gray, and Luvia find the walls and furniture splattered in blood. Clown and Flu are both wounded from fighting the Shadow Beast. It kidnapped Rosalind, and Sagan followed after. Thus, the majority of the blood here belongs to Orlok, who had been torn limb from limb. Rather than treating this like a crime scene, though, Waver makes a guess that the real Orlok Caesarmund wasn't the old man at all, but rather the young boy pushing his wheelchair. More specifically, it seems Orlok had transcribed his memory and personality into the boy, leaving only a tenth of himself in that old body. This is the kind of rebirth that butterfly magecraft can achieve. Orlok, or most of him anyway, had been transferred to the boy's homunculus body over time. Sadly, a remaining tenth of his magic crest is now lost. Even so, all of them put together a plan to defeat the beast and unveil the true culprit. Orlok is certain their target wants him dead the most, and so he uses illuminated butterflies to lure out the murderer. At night, they corner their suspect and reveal his figure with the light of oil lanterns. It is none other than Sagan, whom Waver declares is actually Garion's son, Granite Ashbourne, the true culprit behind these murders. The other guests are shocked by this revelation, and Sagan himself tries to deny it. Waver then whips out his invitation and explains that gathering a bunch of mages to play a riddle game is completely unintuitive for a normal mage. This wasn't really a competition to determine who would inherit Ashbourne's legacy. It's merely a ritual to pass on Garion's inheritance to his own son. Orlok finds this unthinkable. After all, in the past, he himself witnessed the son's funeral. Waver, however, claims this whole mess started because the son had died. The issue is, how exactly can a mage restore a magic crest? What do you use to repair the damage? Surely parts of other magic crests could suffice, but the entire point of magic crests is that they're only compatible with their respective bloodlines. So how did Garion do it? With the help of Papillomagia. In a sense, it's an incomplete form of resurrection. By using magecraft to create a cocoon and birth new life, a mage can forcibly transplant magic crests despite their lack of compatibility. More specifically, if you transfer both the mage and their crest into someone else, you can avoid the compatibility issue altogether. Dropping another bombshell, Waver shows something Luvia had found in the secret room. It's a list of previous patients, mages who had already had their crests restored at the castle. Sagan's name is on this list, implying he already had his crest serviced before Garion's death. The accusation is that granite was torn apart, mixed with the ingredients used to restore magic crests, and fused into Sagan's crest. In a sense, granite could be reborn within the crest. At the very least, Granite's memories and personality could be reborn in an imperfect state. I say imperfect because to truly transfer all of someone, you would need the third magic, Heaven's Feel. As Waver makes his case, the Shadow Beast leaps down from the castle keep, ready to protect Sagan. It once again asks for the angel's name, and Waver answers Aladia. The monster tenses up, indicating he guessed correctly. The idea is that, while Shemhem-Forae is an abbreviated list of the 72 angels, there's also the process of reconstructing the longer term from that abbreviation. For instance, Adonai Melech Neman can be abbreviated as Amen. In reverse, one could look at the phrase Amen and reconstruct its original meaning. The name of this castle is Adra, which Waver reasons is a truncated form of the fallen angel Adramelech. If you abbreviate Adramelech, you can get ADR, ADL, or ADM based on the sounds. If you look back at the Shemhem-Forae, the angel Aladia is ALD, so by rearranging those letters, Waver gave the angelic name of the entire castle. Honestly, I kinda get it, and I also kinda don't. Either way, Waver points out that solving this riddle is merely a distraction from Garion's real goal. Having been found out, Sagan begins to speak like a completely different person. He removes his Yamabushi robes, revealing a magic crest on his right shoulder. He confesses he is Granite Ashbourne and commands the beast to howl, disabling everyone's magic crests. This attack, the Angel's Song, uses the castle to reverberate and amplify its power through the region, taking down any mages who rely on a crest. This is how Heine died, even with his armor. Knowing this ahead of time, Waver had Luvia put a limit on the castle's amplification, significantly limiting the song's strength. In response, the beast grabs Granite and leaps back up to the keep. Waver then entrusts the rest to Grey, who finally jumps into action. Like a badass, she leaps into the air and kicks off the keep's wall in pursuit. Seeing this, Luvia wonders if Grey is a homunculus, but nope, she's human. Grey and the beast fight their way to the top of the castle, where yet another angel statue stands tall. The beast's song not only disables magic crests, but it can also function as a blast of darkness traveling through the air. To counter it, Grey invokes Ad, which transforms into a scythe she uses to slice the incoming waves. She asks Granite to surrender, and suddenly he starts talking more like Sagan again. The mage known as Tokito Jirobo Seigen is a genuine person, but is being corrupted by the presence of granite inside his magic crest. The clash of their wills inside his mind drive him drastically between different emotions. Ultimately, his fondness for Heine lost to his temptation to consume Heine's crest. Screaming out, Seigen commands the castle to open, releasing a flood of spirits. These spirits are the imperfect remains of Garion's victims. Either they were patients who died while having their crests repaired, or people killed so their crests could be used as raw materials in repairing other crests. From a magecraft perspective, angels are ambiguous magical energies, so these spirits must have served the role of angels in the workshop's construction. Orlok fights back against most of these spirits with a swarm of his butterflies. Sadly, despite living in a graveyard, merely sensing the presence of these spirits is enough to scare Gray. Seigen mocks her for being a crappy gravekeeper who's afraid of ghosts and can't even remember her own prayers. She becomes smothered in the castle spirits. Luvia prepares a jewel to help save Gray, but Waver holds her back simply by mentioning the Blackmoor graveyard. Gray herself is very susceptible to spirits, forced to experience their morbid lust and desires, their thoughts and their feelings. It seems cruel to let her be swallowed by them, but while she drowns in this agony, Ad devours the spirits happily. From her despair, she recalls words of her past. Those who were more dead than the dead, those who were more alive than the living, that is what you must destroy. With newfound determination, Gray breaks free of her inhibitions and dances with her blade, slicing these so-called angels to pieces. She returns to attacking the beast, and the two clash in midair as if in a dogfight. Luvia, begging to know exactly what Gray is, elicits a single-word response from Waver: Arthur. Elaborating further, he explains that Gray is King Arthur, the same servant that killed Cainith. Though it's really not fair to say that, considering it was actually Kiritsugu's fault. Waver probably doesn't know that, though. To end their fight, Gray prepares her noble phantasm, chanting Gray, rave, crave, deprave, engrave in me, a grave for you. Her consciousness fades, being taken over by something entirely different. The scythe transforms into the Holy Spear Rongominiad, creating a vortex of mana that shakes the entire castle. In truth, there are 13 promises that limit Rongominiad's power, meaning that this attack is only a fraction of its true potential. As if a piece of the sun had fallen, a brilliant light burns away at the castle roof, carving out toward the hillside. There's a large crater where the castle used to be, revealing an underground room. The beast is dying, with half of its body still squirming on the ground. Seigen had been tossed aside at the last minute, surviving with the loss of an arm. In agony, he screams out as Granide, calling to his mother. The beast responds, opening its jaw toward Orlok, ready to unleash a final, devastating howl. Waver jumps in the way and finds himself cloaked in fog. Since he doesn't directly possess the el-melloi crest, this attack instead targets his mind. The fog mocks him, laughing because no matter how hard he struggles, Waver will never be able to compare to more gifted mages. This curse assaults his most sensitive thoughts, and yet he has a fitting response. Waver doesn't strive for honor. As far as he's concerned, he's already received the greatest honor he could ever ask for, being made one of Iskandar's precious vassals. Thus, what Waver works toward isn't honor itself, but becoming someone worthy of that honor. He lives on as his king commanded him to, and this conviction shatters the fog. Orlok is impressed at how fast Waver overcame this curse. In the few seconds that had passed, however, Seigen stood and stabbed Orlok with a sharpened toko, a ritualistic tool for Buddhist ceremonies. The homunculus body will not survive, so Orlok tells Waver not to worry about it. Seeing this, Waver finally figures out the whodunit. It must have been Orlok who killed Garion, invoking Granide's hatred. At various points, it seems the ordeal was designed to provoke and target Orlok. The boy, with his body now quickly aging without life force, admits it was indeed him who did it. Waver also correctly guesses that Orlok killed Garion because, in reality, Orlok is Granide's real father. The old man fell in love with Garion's wife, and they had an affair. Orlok feared that if her child was indeed his, then transferring Garion's crest would fail. Of course, Granny died prematurely. Eventually, Garion took his wife and made her into his familiar, the Ashborn Beast. She was made as a storehouse for magic crests. Horrified, Orlok murdered Garion, not considering the fact that this may have been Garion's way of showing affection to his wife as a mage. Orlok's childish body has now deteriorated to a decrepit mummy of sorts. In his last moments, he strokes Sagan's face, calling him son, and touches the beast, calling her his love. Conjuring a final swarm of golden butterflies, he restores the beast to her human form, and he dies embracing her under the moonlight. In the aftermath, Waver and Gray return to the clock tower. While heading to class one day, Gray encounters Flat Escardos, an eccentric young mage with blonde hair and charming looks. Like a freak, he senses Gray by her smell and sniffs his way through the hallways to try and find her. She, reasonably, hides from him till he wanders off in disappointment. Regrettably, none of their efforts at the castle proved helpful in repairing Rhinus' magic crest. The method turned out to be unsuitable and imperfect after all. It was a risky gamble to begin with, but it had the chance of completely wiping out Waver's entire debt. Oh well, at least he came out of it with a new student, that being Luvia. Waver and Gray are found in the hallway by… wait, what? Hishidi Arashino, the bespectacled Japanese beauty who died at the castle, is somehow still alive. In truth, she never died to begin with, and the corpse they found was merely a preserved body made to look like it had died. The eyes were removed to fit the angelic name, along with the fact that she has mystic eyes that would have given it away. Her glasses weren't at the crime scene because they're a rare set of mystic eye killers, and she couldn't afford the part with them. But why go through all this trouble? Waver suspects it's because the Faculty of Law has been working with the Ashborn family for over 100 years to establish this ritual. In addition to helping with the ritual, it was a chance for the faculty to kill off mages they considered a threat. Damn! The clock tower is not a safe place. It's hard to imagine any of them getting along. Even so, Waver has no proof of this accusation, so he lets it slide. Sagan, despite losing a friggin' arm, survived the ordeal. His rehab consists of separating his memories from those of Granide. Heine's magic crest was also recovered, and Rosaline is involved with figuring out who will succeed the Istari family. As Waver and Gray head back down the hall, Hishidi taunts him about his wish. That is, Waver wants to enter the Fifth Grail War for the chance to summon Iskandar once again. Sadly, Gray, our narrator, confirms that this wish of his never comes to pass. At the time, though, she simply grabs Waver's hand and whispers to let her join him in his battle. Aww, Gray is the best. That concludes Volume 1 of Case Files. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, even if I don't have as many visual references, given this is a novel. Perhaps there's something fun about that, though, something akin to an audiobook. Going into the comments, let me know if there's anything you learned. I know I've learned a shit ton, and I'm excited to learn even more. Before I go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, C. James Torley, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Freebrick, Cosmonaut, RNG Ear Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Johnny Tsunami, Link Pendrago, Caitlin P, Vladimir Rovna, Succubus Sakura, Normace, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
celebrate your fandom!